It takes a lot today at the highest level of leadership to almost really, like a lot of times people say, I want them to know that I'm, a leader of the people. Once you're so far away, you can't be anymore. It takes a great deal of humbleness to say that. You can want to. You can say that you once could really relate, but you can't. And you need to develop those people that are really the ones that are having the biggest impact on doing the actual work. And so if you can just sit back and drop the idea that it's about you and just your vision, and really, like, yes, your vision is important and very important. But what's the people down? They have to be able to lead that vision.
How do you get 10,000 people to take a step to the left? What's behind the relentless mindset of a world champion? Why do teams of exceptional talent fail? How do you manage the pressure to perform? These are just some of the curious questions we will attempt to answer as we bring you world leaders, curious minds, exceptional talent, successful CEOs, and incredible human beings who know how to inspire great leaders and are inspiring great leaders themselves. I am Craig Johns, high performance leadership expert, international speaker, and CEO of Speakers Institute Corporate and World Sport Coach. This is the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong. Welcome to the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast. Our guest today is an executive and organizational leadership coach, a member of the Harvard Medical School affiliated Institute of Coaching, SHRM, and the Women's Leadership Institute. Her education includes political science from North Idaho College. She is a certified professional coach from Marshall Goldsmith and is certified in mindfulness, performance, and awareness from UC San Diego. She has held a range of management, executive, and leadership roles at Sears, Kohl's, JCPenney, and Liverpool, Los Angeles. As an executive coach, she has worked with leaders at NASA, Raleigh's, and various Fortune 500 companies. I have the privilege of introducing you to a board member of Lamp of Learning, the founder of Intentions to Actions Leadership, and a nature lover who finds inspiration in paddleboarding, hiking, and strolling along the beautiful beaches of San Diego. Pam Marcheski. Pam, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Craig. How are you? It's good to be here.
I'm very well, thank you, and all the better for it to have you on the show and having a great conversation today.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So where did you grow up, and what was the big dream when you were a little kid?
Where did I grow up? This question is fun for me because I sometimes say I'm not sure. I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and I was adopted as a little girl, as a baby. And at 5, we moved to Escondido, California. And so me, my adopted brother, the dog and parents in a Pinto drove across the country and landed in California. And we stayed there until I was 12. And then California started getting really populated and busy, and kept the journey here. And my parents decided we're going to Idaho. And so we moved to Idaho around 12. And so I spent many years in Idaho, although we did come back to California once. And really my journey was when we were in Idaho, I went to junior high, and it was my brother Garrett and I and my parents. And my brother Garrett passed away suddenly of a heart attack at age 14, and I was 13. And that incident, that horror of our family, that tragedy, 2 years later, my parents, because they're amazing, adopted my brothers now, Brian and Kevin, and they were 14 and I was 15. And at the time they had gone through a lot in their life previous to being with us. And we melded those lives together. And we went back to California for a short period of time, for another year and a half. And then we went back to Idaho. So some days I say California, some days I say Idaho. It's a mixed bag for me.
That resilience of growing up where one, you're adopted into a new family, then you've got, and obviously a tragedy that we wish upon no family or parents, and then having two more people adopt into the family, it's quite a lot of resilience that you can develop at such a young age, and also agility and adaptability skills that can really set you up for long term. How did you cope with those changes? Be 14 years old, you're lots of hormones going on as a young teenage girl, and you lose someone who you're very, very close to. How did that change? Did it change you much, or how did you cope with that?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I think I give so much credit to my parents about resilience and everything. And starting from being adopted, being adopted in my family was like, it was worse to be told we were having liver for dinner. It was no big deal, and my parents raised, my brother Garrett was adopted. He was a baby, and then I was a baby. And we were raised with, you're not really that special. You just came to us differently. And I think it was so brilliant in how my parents handled it, because that really laid the foundation of, it really, like, the thing that only separates us is what you want to separate you, and to make you different. And so they just did a great job of that and didn't make it anything special. So when my brother Garrett died, the pain and suffering my family went through was no different than if we had been blood related. But the other thing when Garrett died, what was foundationalized for me at the time was how the community rallied around us. And I think I learned at a really young age that when something tragic, big happens, that is unexplainable. 14-year-olds, they don't die of heart attacks, right? How a community will rally around that and support you and guide you and be there and to comfort you and love you. And we had incredible sense of help in our community. So that was there. And then I think my parents, watching them, how they went through it and how they cared for me, but still had to do their own suffering. I think that was probably the hardest thing for me because, yeah, you're right. I'm a teenager. I'm a girl. We're a mess already. And, I think just having to also be there for each other. But I think getting the opportunity that my parents gave to say, but we still have other love to give, and being open to adopting more, just set the stone of like that tragedy led us to, bringing others into our life. So that I really thank my parents for. It wasn't easy. They're teenage boys. They lost, they went through all of their stuff, and then we're moving to California and back and forth. But I think the conditions just change. And I think that's where I learned, like, conditions and how you want to respond to conditions is the most important thing. And that really is kind of guides me today, is like, what are the conditions you're operating in and how do you want to respond to them?
Yeah. I think every kid would love a younger brother or younger sister. When they come along at your teenage years, did you fall straight into that, sort of big sister nurturing role, or were you just like, I'm a teenager, I just want to get out, I want to find my independence, I want to hang out with my friends? How did that work for you?
Well, Coeur d'Alene was a small community too. So I really love the fact that the community really embraced Brian and Kevin right away. So it wasn't kind of big sister, although my brother Kevin would say like they were immediately accepted by everybody because Pam said so. But we almost kind of became in concert. We're only 6 months apart. And so I really didn't necessarily see myself as the big sister role per se. I think we were just trying to find our way together, and that was challenging, and they had to find their way with, mom and dad and myself. And that was tough. And imagine being two boys who have just been adopted by a family who lost a son who was the same age as them.
Yeah.
So they had to go through those conflicts as well. That's tough.
learn a lot about yourself. I always talk about, sometimes you need to get lost to find yourself, and in those, obviously we have unfortunate tragedies in our life, but it's sometimes in those moments where there's crisis or tragedy or deep uncomfortableness is where we really learn about ourselves and find where we want to go. And what did you want to do? For you, obviously you're finding yourself as a human being at that age, but did you have any idea what you wanted to do in the world? Was there something that fascinated you?
I loved public issues. I was really involved in politics right away, and in government. I thought for sure I'd be an attorney. That was my trajectory. My father was sure, because he says, you just like to talk so much, you might as well. I was on the debate team in high school and college. And I will say that, a class or something that I studied that really defined me was debate. What I loved so much about debate at that time was you get one resolution for the year. You have to know the topic, both sides, front and back. You lived your life by information. You didn't get to make hasty generalizations and use, crazy sources. You had to really know your stuff. And so debate really kind of set me up for being like, how do you look at both sides of things, and not taking just one stance. But that is truly was the trajectory that I anticipated that I would go down, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And so, what was your first job? What did you, was it while you were a teenager? Was it when you left school?
Yeah, no, we definitely grew up in a family like, I was working at age 15, and Taco Bell. I was a great Taco Bell employee. I could make the best tacos, and I loved it. Yeah, I did that for years. And then while I was going into college, I fell into retail and got hired temporarily, for the opening group and as a fitting room clerk. And so I was checking women in and out of the fitting room, and just part of the opening of the store. And what I found out later is, they let a whole lot of people go when they open a store, they hire a bunch of people and they let them go. I was supposed to be let go, but somebody forgot to let me know. So they kept me. And I'm thankful that they did. I really did enjoy retail. I loved working with the customers. And I really loved merchandising, and working with people. So I was fortunate to fall on that while I was in school.
So you're studying political science, you fall in love with retail. Were you someone that was just happy being on the floor, working, you talked about merchandising there, or did you start to get a sense pretty early on that you would tend towards more people leading roles, you're managing people, you're moving higher up into different roles around, leadership?
Yeah, I think I wish Craig was kind of some visionary thing like that for me, and that smooth path. It just wasn't. I got married very young. I had my son at 21, and I was divorced by 25. And during that period, I really did think I would still be going into law and politics. But at 25, I was now a sole single mom of a 4-year-old, and my trajectory became food, roof, and daycare. Mm-hmm. And that was that was essential. That's what we were relying on. And I was fortunate that I had a skill set in retail and I had done numerous roles. And I fell into a leadership role in retail with Sears as a department manager, thanks to my best friend and a store manager who took a chance on me. And that's just true that he did. And she recommended me, and he took a chance. And I think that's when I really started to realize how much I loved it. I loved all of it. I loved the merchandising. I loved the operating statement. I loved the people part. It all made sense to me, and all came together. Gave me a little stability. But still, we were not even close to, where we needed to be as far as, my son and I. I was thankful for my community and support. This was during a time where you worked nights, weekends in retail. I was in the store, so I had to rely on other sources. And my store manager at the time, Mr. Seeley, as my son will still refer to him, he just said to me, he said, "Don't get comfortable." He said, "I think I'll work for you someday, but you have to move." And that's really where it started my whole retail career. They offered me a position, and those just kept happening. And I got to move to a lot of different places, including Alaska. It was just Casey and I being trucked around location to location, and that's how my career progressed.
When you get outside your comfort zone, you find a way. You always find a way. I'm a young parent right now, and there's some days you just go, "How does this work?" And you just go, "Look, just make it happen." You find a way. And
Yeah.
I think some people get a little bit stuck in the comfort zone sometimes and go, "Okay, I'm just going to take the easy road here." And you don't have to. You don't have to. Like, you put yourself out there, and it's amazing how things work out for you, how you find a way through things. And so that's what I love about life, right? There's no direct pathway to anything. There's no one way, and you can always choose your own road or choose your own path, to get to reach wherever you're going. And sometimes you may not even know where you're going, but you will find it if you put yourself out there.
Yeah, I'm sure, you can relate to, having moments in your life where you think, I can't control all these conditions and what am I going to do? But when you stop, you're like, you find your way out, right? You have to sometimes. And when I had a small child, I could spend a whole lot of time talking about the conditions of how we got there, or we can just move through them. And I just felt like we should start to move through them.
Yeah, we've got to be careful we don't sit in that space of, it's unfair, and then we start blaming. And if we go into blame mode, we're not serving anyone, not serving ourselves, and we've got to be able to move into that space of what is the opportunity, what can we do in this situation? Which I think it's a great lesson for anyone.
Yeah, and not holding anger, and I know that's hard sometimes. I think that sometimes when something big happens, that it's natural, right? We want to be protective, and we can have anger. But one thing I think when I was raising Casey was important for me was that people understood that we're not going to have anger towards his father. We're not going to have anger towards that. He wasn't going to be raised that way. I didn't want my son growing up with a space of just anger in his heart. It just didn't serve him. And that was really important.
Yeah, just good. And once you're into leadership, well, what did obviously people would have seen something in you. What did you see in yourself that you recognize after a while, may not have been straight away, that really served you from a leadership point of view?
I think in the beginning, I knew I had a pretty good informational toolbox. I could remember things really well. And merchandising, I will tell you, especially in retail, I got the fact that how we presented things is how you wanted to present things in a way that tapped into how people feel internally, because it wasn't about the external, it was how people felt internally. And if they internally felt good about something, they would make a purchase. And it really was that insight there of the way you present in a clear way to somebody and let them find their way, that they'll buy things. But also it was the same way with the people that I was leading, at the time too, that they were all individually different, and that I learned early on that we had to appreciate that and not try to force them into one way of doing it. Yeah, we had to have guidelines for sure, but we also had to allow them to find their way, for them to flourish, I guess, at the highest level. So, and I also realized early on, I was pretty good at rallying the troops per se, and getting the team focused on a common goal or vision, and staying true to that vision was really important.
Staying true to the vision. Moving from one company to the next company, obviously you got a great start there with some of the merchandising earlier on. as you change companies, what did you notice in their visions that were working or not working?
Oof. I think, I had the privilege and honor of working for two really iconic companies, Sears and JCPenney's, both around for over 100 years. I think what worked for Sears when I first started, they were very clear. We had the 3 C's: compelling place to work, shop, and invest. And this was before it all became about quarterly earnings. And we were really consistent about those 3 C's. And we could remember them. And so when we did things that were right for the customer and right for the people, it would be the right compelling place to invest. And there was a consistency there.
Okay.
And then the shift came when more competition came in, and Sears had to kind of vie at that a little bit differently, right? And you saw these small decisions being made that didn't keep all of the 3 C's consistent. And it really did move more towards that, just the compelling place to invest part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really where they lost their way. When I went to JCPenney's, what I loved about when I started with them, when I interviewed with the group, is they had been there like 30, 40 years, amazing. But yet they had made some adaptations to the model, but they didn't forget who they were. At that time, when I had joined them, we just kind of the golden rule, and I think that they had still had that foundation of who they were, even though they had made small modifications in it. But again, more competition comes in, and you start to see the dynamics of all of it start to change, and you start to see some maybe reactionary decisions being made, and it just got harder. I think it's when the conditions are really calm and there's not a lot of competition, you can really tap into the things, internally and operate in that way. This is not our world today. It's very different.
Yeah, competition does, it can change you a lot. But if you can stay true to your values and what you stand for, you can weather those storms and you'll find a way, which I think is a really important approach. You've now moved into, over the last few years, you moved a lot into kind of that coaching space, really looking at intentional mindfulness, leadership. For you over the last, I don't know, let's say probably decade now, what have you seen as the big shifts in leadership?
Well, I don't think that leadership competencies, I think as far back as we can go, I don't think they changed that much. I don't think the actual external competencies of leadership haven't changed, and the behaviors around them haven't changed. We might have new little names for them but they haven't. What has changed is more internal competencies. And leaders today, based on many factors that I've seen, is they don't trust themselves as much more reactive, maybe a little bit too in the weeds of things, because you can be, right? So you see today with, it's more complex. You have more information, you have more competition, you have more diversity, you have all these factors in there. And so today it's more about the internal stuff. And that's why I focus on mindfulness, and why I believe in it so much, is because you have to internally work with that. And you have to really have some inner trust, some inner confidence, all of those places. And that's really hard today. But you really can't show up as the highest level leader in those external competencies without it.
So speed of change, we're looking at greater competition, greater diversity, more data. If we keep going at this pace and people aren't sort of taking care of that internal perspective from a leadership point of view, it doesn't matter how good there are external competencies. So how do you approach the internal side of leadership to help people be a lot more intentional about the way they lead?
Yeah. I think if I use like the course that through UCSD that I'm certified in, we really focus on some core competencies, internal competencies. One is being open, and that's just being curious. So starting to pay attention, right? It's just having open curiosity about yourself and about your habits, non-judgmentally. So the purest definition of mindfulness is paying attention on purpose, with intention, non-judgmentally. And it's the non-judgmental part that kind of gets us often, right? So we always want to we have a little stories in our head. So it's really just paying attention. And the noticing is kind of foundational there. Courage, it's recognizing that thoughts and emotions, they're what we have. They are not what we are. And that everything that we think is felt somewhere in the body. And so you have to do a little bit more intentional work to really notice how's that showing up and how do you care for yourself. Judson Brewer is an amazing, he's a psychiatrist, neuroscientist, mindfulness teacher. He's wrote many books, wrote Craving Mind, which I've read many times. He talks about habit loops. But one of his quotes that I often say is that, the thinking mind doesn't hold a candle to the feeling body. Everything that happens up here in this muscle is showing up somewhere. And so today, why is that important? Because we have to pay attention to, what's here and how it's showing up, because we don't recognize soon enough when we're feeling really tense or we're having headaches or we're being really reactive. But by teaching people how to kind of tap into their own physical sense, you can kind of be with that a little bit longer and then you can care for that maybe a little bit sooner and not react to it. You can respond. So we really kind of focus on how to help people get curious, how to tap into their own self, to recognize that everything that happens is a feeling and an emotion, and that we have it. It doesn't mean we have to be it. So we teach a lot about not attaching to our thoughts and emotions, which is really important in today's world because we can be really reactive because I have anger or I am. And we try to teach how to, I have anger, I have sadness, I have agitation. So it stops being what it is, and so you can be less reactive. So it really helps slow down. And the science around that really is that you've got your prefrontal cortex and your parasympathetic nervous system. And I try to dumb it down in the way I can. I always tell everybody, I'm like, I grew up with a sheet metal worker father. So I'm a sheet metal worker of coaching. Let's just talk about it. Sometimes the baby brain and the nervous system are going crazy. We can tap into it. We can settle it down so we can be a little bit more discerning and show up more confident and more present. And then also we just tap into the story in our head, that our thoughts and our emotions are what we have. It's what is the story behind them that we tell ourselves, and then be more strategic with that information, and so that we can make better decisions for ourselves and set maybe different habit patterns. And that's hard. I always say that cell phones, technology, all of that, genie's not going back in the bottle. That's not happening. But you have to decide what boundaries that you want to create. You and I grew up, I don't know, you might not have. Do you remember when there was a cord that attached to the phone and it was on a wall?
Yeah, and you used to dial around.
Right? But we have whole generations today that have no idea. That's preconceptual to them, right? They know nothing of that, right? So there used to be these natural boundaries. People would go to work, they would come home, and there would be space. Kids would go to school, they would come home, and they'd be space. And they might remember something, but they don't have to live it 24/7, right? That space is gone. There is no natural boundaries. And it's not coming back, at least in modern world, right? I mean, I guess if you want to go be a monk, you might be able to separate out from it. But in today's day and age, that's not happening. So you have to learn to create your own boundaries, because if you don't do that, you really do get caught up in that overload. And that's where that inner weather really kicks in. So try to teach people that, can you create your own space, because it's essential. The brain's a muscle. And like any other muscle, it only has a capacity for so much.
You talk about open-mindedness and curious, and I find a lot of people can see things, but they observe, but they're not very good at being able to take action on it. And so, how important is the people around you or having a coach? Because a lot of people can say, oh, look, I can do this all on my own. But sometimes there's lots going on in our head and we're trying to deal with it, but it's very, very hard sometimes to make sense of it on our own.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's a lot. Yeah. And so I think the coaches really give us that opportunity to maybe ask questions and guide to find the answers. I always think whenever when I wake up in the morning, back in my old world, I used to think about every one of the people that directly reported to me every night. Did I check in? All of those things. Now, when I wake up in the morning, I always think, okay, see them whole, guide, don't give, trust the process. It's all inside and it's not about me. And so when I think about those things, what does that mean, right? Like if I see them whole, hopefully, what I think is that we could just ask questions, right? So people can be more honest with themselves. And in today's world, to have somebody that can hold that space for you and let you really do that internal work in a trusted way, it really does help. It's vital in helping people understand themselves and to really find their own answers. And so I don't really have any answers for anybody. I think that if we ask the right questions and guide and create that space, sometimes we might have to guide with a little bit more certainty, but people find their way. I have my own coach. I can't imagine not having him. And I'm so grateful. I actually, Pete, who runs MPeak and certifies all of us, he also does individual coaching. And so now he is my coach, and he helps me all the time.
What was the change for you to go into coaching? Like what was the catalyst behind stepping out of being in leadership role to now going, I want to coach?
Yeah, well, a number of things. When JCPenney's, when that came to an end, that was a difficult time in the space of, I knew, I had strategically known for a year or two that I was probably like kind of gonna be done. But when it happens, that's a whole different thing, right? Now it's like, okay, well, here you go. You don't have your title anymore. You're not, you're losing your identity. And I'd really been practicing mindfulness for a while. I'd been dipping my toe in the water. I tell everybody, how did you, when they ask, how did you find this? And so I always knew I had a pretty good toolbox, mindfulness or leadership toolbox. But a couple years into the last few years of corporate life, I realized I didn't feel like the toolbox was opening very good. Like I found myself a little too reactive, maybe not showing up the way I wanted to when I stepped into a store. It wasn't anything like being called out by my team, but I felt it. And I felt like internally it wasn't good. I wasn't sleeping as good. And I fell upon the book 10% Happier by Dan Harris when I was in the airport, because I was always in an airport, it seemed. And that's where I started. I really enjoyed the book because it was very practical, and I'm a very practical and tactical person. Like, how do we just make it real? And it was moments in the day. So when I left Penny's and I knew I was coming back to California, I was living in Seattle at the time, and I wanted to do a retreat for myself. And I found MPeak at UCSD. And I loved it because it was not just mindfulness. It was mindfulness, strengths, positive psychology, but it was also about performance, how to take your performance to the next level. More levels of flow state, dealing with, resilience, all of those things. It just tapped into my personality. And so I enrolled, and I enrolled simply for myself to take it. And I went, and I went on a Friday. It was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was supposed to be flying out on that Monday to talk to another company in the same retail world for a pretty good opportunity. And on Friday after the class, I'm like, I love this class and there's something here. And I knew by Saturday I wanted to stay and I wanted to pursue this because I really do feel like there's such a need today to help people get to that inner peace or that inner part of themselves so that they can show up better for others. So I don't know how I convinced Pete, this energetic woman who's coming in is, I'm going to stay and get certified. I think he looked at me like, oh my goodness, I don't know. But yeah, I had to do the prerequisites and make sure that I was set up for it. And I made 2 really difficult phone calls on that Monday. I had to the company, and they were great. They're very kind and very great. But the second was to my parents. And I said, hey, I'm gonna I'm going to step out of this corporate stuff for a while and try this. Yeah. They thought I was out of my mind. And, but they really did. My dad was like, you're going to do what? You're going to do what? But yeah, I really did believe in it. I believed in the power of it, and I felt it was really essential. And so it took me a year to get certified, though. Hardest training I've ever done. Hardest training, but I'm so thankful that I did.
Well, what type of training? You talk about hard training. Here we are, mindfulness, trying to make things easier.
Right.
And so, what was hard? Like for you, what was hard about that training?
Yeah, I really getting over yourself. Yeah. There were so many things in my life that had naturally come for me. I was very fortunate, I guess, from a leadership standpoint, even as a little kid, that it wasn't that I didn't have to work those skills. I did, especially as I progressed, and as I became, each level of leadership. But they seemed accessible and right there. In mindfulness training is such a different approach of really you really are guiding, you're asking questions and you're really tapping into letting people sit in their own discomfort in order to find their way out. And we really do mean that. And that can be really hard, right? Because you don't want to see somebody suffering. You want to help them get out of it, all of those things. And we work really hard not to do that. But one of the hardest parts for me was recording myself in guiding meditations. It was one of my biggest roadblocks. And I learned so much about myself and about this is so silly, but it wasn't for me. It was like this big thing. And that's part of the training is that along the way, you have to do a certain amount of meditations and you have to record them and other people have to listen to them and they have to give you feedback on them. And I was outside my comfort zone. And then the second part then is obviously you have to guide class and then you have to be followed on that and you have to do the mentorship on it. And was the idea of getting people into class, right? Because I could believe in it, but now I had to get others to believe in it as well. And trusting myself in that. So yeah, it was tough.
So you're in that situation where you're being recorded, you're doing your first kind of sessions. Did you have people in the room or were you kind of just going through a guided meditation with imaginary people there? I'm in a bathroom trying to make sure it's quiet, right? Yeah, but there's just something about just talking openly, I guess, it was just a block. And it was fascinating for me to watch my story and my little ego over it and my inability for a period of time to not just push, I roadblocked myself for a while and it was I know it was my mind. I knew that. And then I finally had a kind of a co-pilot. We had the other people that were in the course and they're like, just do it. And, I was like, okay. And so I finally pushed through it and I had to go with the good enough plan. I talk a lot about that now. I think because I was so unfamiliar with it, I thought it had to be perfect. Mm. And usually the good enough plan is the perfect plan. Yeah. I find when people go to record video, they quite often the first take is the best one and they will go for 80 takes. And it's your first one was great. I was good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. And now I record them all the time and I send them to my business partner and he takes them and he puts them out on the website so that there's more guided meditations. I don't listen to any of them. I just, here you go. And if he sees there's a major problem, he'll tell me. But other than that, and I will tell you, having him has been wonderful too, because he just takes the second, the guessing out of it too.
You brought up something real interesting there before that, we can quite often sell other people's stuff really easy. We can deliver, the services, or we can deliver something really, really well. But to try and sell ourselves and the service, because quite often it's really selling yourself. Or why do people want to come to you rather than someone else who does the same thing? So you're kind of selling yourself in a way. Is a really different proposition. It's unnatural for a lot of people to talk, to be able to sell and influence someone to come along and join them. So you talked about that part being a bit of a challenge. What were you dealing with there, and how did you overcome that so that you could get into a space where you felt comfortable, or maybe you didn't, maybe you stayed in the uncomfortable zone, in being able to influence others to come along until that momentum, takes over for you and people turn up because of the name and the reputation?
Yeah. Yeah. Did I step out completely and just get over the discussion? No, I didn't. I was so uncomfortable. And I think what I learned so much about myself is that when you work for a corporation, you're naturally given a team. That's your team, right? And like it or not, they kind of have to, you have to influence, you have to do the right things and all of that. But they're kind of given to you, right? Or you get to pick that. And it's a little bit different. And one thing we know about human beings and how we've evolved is we've evolved because we come together. And so it really is, the fear is really about the fear of rejection and the fear of separating out from another. And the more we separate ourselves out, the more we put ourselves at risk. That is how we've evolved. We are not here today because we all did things individually. So it's within us, right? And so knowing that is great, but I had to really sit with the fact of just come to center, right? It's not about you, and find some commonality. And I know that always serves me the best, and I truly do. I love when you can just be relatable with people. And I think that's what really helped me is, to know that I do believe in this, and that when we bring people together, people come along and they'll find. The other thing I have to give up on is that everybody has to get everything 100%. No, they don't. Maybe they only get to dip a toe in the water. Maybe they go to the middle end of the pool. That is not for me to decide. That's every individual gets to decide how far in the pool they want to go. And I think that really helped me kind of get over that and have more of a coming together.
It's a really good analogy, the pool and how far you want to dip your toe and how far you want to go. Going out and swimming in the middle of the ocean where you can't see the bottom is not for everyone. Doesn't matter how competent the swimmer they may be. And that I think that's a really good analogy to consider. I do a lot of work with speakers and training up and coming speakers who are getting ready to speak on stages, or just improve their public speaking so they can present more effectively at work, or even deliver the speech at their daughter's wedding or something like that. But the biggest part here, you talk about the self part is people become very self-centered. The moment they're in front of a camera, the moment they are in front of people, because they start worrying about, and whether it's conscious or not, they start to worry about, am I saying the right word? Is it perfect? What if I'm wrong? What if people reject me? So it's all about themselves. So their intention is in the total opposite side of where they need to be when it comes to influencing someone, where it's got to be in that space of what's holding you back and how can I help in a way. So especially from when you're coaching someone or you're going to help someone through something, you've got to really lean into that other person or the other people. And as soon as you can remove that self-centeredness approach of, look at, what do I look like? What am I saying? Am I saying the right thing? Then we get ourselves into that space of struggling, and we're not going to be attractive. Yeah. People are not attracted to self-centeredness. People are attracted to feeling like they're the most important person in the room. So what a great, to be able to shift through that takes courage. It takes a bit of time too. You can't naturally go from doing something brand new and not be focused on yourself to being able to shift that quickly. It's not something that happens straight away in most cases.
It doesn't. And, I think you said something there when you talked about when the conditions are so that people turn towards their self. Well, what are the conditions of today?
Mhm.
We are on camera all the time. We're attached to something that's serving us up opinions and other ideas. So we have affirmation bias, right? We have social contagion. And so we are literally living in conditions where we're constantly thinking about ourselves. We're constantly in our head, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I believe so much in this course is to recognize like the conditions of today, you're really close to it. And when you're really close to those conditions, you react to those, right? So how do you be with? And one of the things I think that's different in mindfulness too is that we honor those feelings rather than try to rationalize them or explain them. I had to honor that. Like, this feels gross. This feels unnatural. This feels, like confident. So in mindfulness, we don't go this or that. We're like, have it. And I can be with it because it doesn't have to own me. It doesn't define me. It's just the feeling or thoughts and emotion I'm having. Now, how do I want to work with that? And that's how you move through it. And I think that is a difference in today's world of resilience today is you've got to honor how you feel about those things because it's going to keep being served out.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of, like, for me, it's, I suppose I grew up where we never talked about resilience. It seems to be this, in a way, it seems to be a word that's come through. And I suppose I never thought about it because I grew up in a world of sport where, you win or lose and you learn along the way very, very fast. You don't have a choice or you're out or you give up in a way.
Yeah.
You're in or you're out. But when you're in, there's resilience happening all the time. And so when people started talking about, we've got to do resilience training for people, I was like, what do you mean? How do you train resilience? You just live resilience. Like, it happens. It's just a part of it. But so for you, do you do anything around resilience training, or are you more just through intentional and mindfulness, you're able to do things that help people through those challenging times, which becomes resilience?
I love your philosophy on it, because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, how many courses on resilience are out there today? Like, do you know? Because I'm like, there's so many, right? And I'm like, but we're naturally resilient. I mean, let's just be clear. Saber-tooth tigers no longer exist, but we're here. Somewhere along the way, we were resilient and we figured it out, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're as a species, I think we're phenomenally resilient. And I think we forget that in modern day. It's like, what are you talking about? And yet, I think it's more mental resilience. That's probably something that we're not as trained for. I think we're very trained for the changes in conditions physically, right? I think there's been so many changes in what comes at us mentally that resilience isn't naturally as tapped into.
Mm.
And so that's where I think in mindfulness, we really, I try to tap into, I don't have to call it resilience. I think it's a residual. It's a product of being able to be with, have balanced effort, to be able to have the courage to be open and curious and own what's there. Allows you to build up that mental resilience and find your way.
Yeah, it's kind of like coping with accelerated resilience.
Yeah.
We've got change that's happening faster in certain areas than it's ever happened before, and it will continue to accelerate. So the changes that happen in our life are so much quicker, and I think sometimes it's dealing with change fatigue in a way, and that resilience of being able to get up, pick yourself up day after day after day. Now, if you've been in environments where you put under pressure lots when you're young, you tend to get that accelerated. That's why I love things like sport, and it doesn't have to be sport, but those things where you're put under pressure on a regular basis and you're challenged in different ways regularly that allow you to build that resilience, an accelerated resilience, both from a mental and physical point of view.
Yeah.
But we can do it in other ways. Like, it's not the only environment. You can do it through music, or you can do it through other things where it generally requires some level of coaching in a way, and some level of competition to a certain extent. And that's what life is. It's, people say life is a competition in a way. We have to compete for attention. We have to compete for our jobs. They're not just safe anymore than what my parents' generation, you could have pretty much chosen a job and stayed with it for 40 years if you wanted to. And many people did, because there weren't the competition for them, whereas now there is. And then there's also the challenge of the lifespan of a certain job or skill sets too changing, so that adaptive or that accelerated resilience that's required to go, you know what, I need to change up my skill set. I need to think differently. I need to build something new, is having, it is challenging our minds in a different way. And this intentional leadership needs to be there, because we don't have that time and space we used to have.
You're so right. I mean, I'm thinking about when I was a first store manager. I was 29. I was dropped off in Missoula, Montana. My district manager was, I loved him. He said, look, you can't do much damage. It's a pretty small store to the company. You're not that big of an impact on the company, so you're not going to see me very often. He said, but you got something there, so we think we're going to trust you with the store. Go ahead, have at it. He came back occasionally. Email, I mean, we're still on like old DOS email kind of stuff, right? I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity at that time. And that was one of my first experiences, because it was empowering. I made good decisions and I made stupid decisions. But there was a level of trust there between the separation between us, right? Like, he had to trust me. He couldn't text me. He couldn't email me all the time. He didn't want to. And I had to run that store, the best I could with what I had. It is so different today. It is so different today. Today, that same store manager, first of all, they'd go through a series of probably 17 interviews, which would be a little silly. And then they would probably have to spend a week with somebody in there. They would have 1/4 of the leadership that I had supporting me in the store, and they would be connected every second of the day. They are. And we wonder why they can't make decisions.
Mm-hmm.
We wonder why they, right? Like, you gotta see what the conditions are, right? So it's just, we've got to operate you in sports or all the things, right? We had to get in there and do it. We had to get through the messiness and the effort of it. So that's missing today. And I think that's tough. It's tough, and not, especially in that trusting part, and learning how to like make your own decisions and make your own mistakes. And I get it. I mean, we have social media today. If somebody makes a mistake in one place, it can affect the whole company, or we think it can, and we react to it. But it's not. It's just different. So that mental resilience is really critical. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. We've got what we've got, right? We've got all this technology. We've got access to data. We've got, in real time pretty much as well. As leaders, we know that going forward that there's going to be continuous change in different areas. For you, what is it that leaders should take into consideration about how can we do this better, but knowing we're going to have all these tools here, but how can we lead more effectively so that people can be more effective at making decisions and have that space to grow and evolve and be more effective leaders than potentially than what they are right now?
Ooh, that's a big one. Yeah. Well, I hesitate because I think there's a lot there. I think it depends so if you're at the highest level of leadership, you're a CEO of a company or you're in the C-suite, I think one of the most important things today is really to tap out what are the conditions, to really ask yourself, what are the conditions of the people who are really doing the actual work, individual contributors of your company. And if you're 4 levels away from that, step away and say, it's those conditions. Invest in the people that are leading those people. And then the next level. And trust. And then when you invest in them, then trust them to lead those people. It takes a lot today at the highest level of leadership to almost really, like a lot of times people say, I want them to know that I'm, a leader of the people. Once you're so far away, you can't be anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a great deal of humbleness to say that. You can want to. You can say that you once could really relate, but you can't. And you need to develop those people that are really the ones that are having the biggest impact on doing the actual work. And so if you can just sit back and drop the idea that it's about you and just your vision, and really, like, yes, your vision is important and very important. But what's the people down? They have to be able to lead that vision. And so I just think that is so critical today and not happening near enough. And we're not, and I get why. I mean, I do. I mean, on a practical standpoint, if you're running a company, right, you're responsible for the bottom line, and it's really easy to get attached to that, but you need to see what is your scope of influence and impact.
Yeah, I love something beautiful you said in there around condition. That word's kind of stuck with me a bit here. The vision is only as good as the conditions that your people get to work in.
I used to say this all the time. Once I got to a certain level, I am not responsible for the numbers on the operating statement. That is a reflection of how I create the conditions for people to be able to lead others. Because I'm not ringing the register. I'm not stocking the shelves. I'm not unloading the trucks. I'm not doing those things. Do I go and visit those areas? Absolutely. But it's too big of an ego to think that is who I am. That isn't, and that's not fair. And so what I do care about is, what are the conditions of the person that is having to make those decisions and do those things? I'll give you an example. There's been a number of public issues that have happened where the frontline employee, right, makes a decision, and social media goes wild at that decision and makes a whole lot of splash about it, right? Whether they made a right decision or not. And we see leaders who will react to the public outcry in those decisions, and they will make very big global decisions for their organization. And I get why. But I don't even know if I've seen it yet, seen any that said, what were the conditions of the person in the business that might have led to that? I wonder if they got a break. I wonder if they had the resources. Because I don't believe that people wake up and want to do harm or be evil to other people. I do believe that people sometimes do really stupid things based on the fact that because they're human beings. And when there's so much pressure and so much coming at people and so many things that we don't know what's going on in their life, sometimes people do make bad decisions. But a leader's job is to make sure that the conditions are really, really good, so that at best, 90% of the time, most people will make the right decision. 5% might always be looking to do the wrong thing. 5% will always do the right thing. 90%, when the conditions are so good or so bad, will determine how they respond. It's just what we do.
I love that. We all know smart people have great answers, but the most successful people ask great questions. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
Oh, what a fun question. I started improv last week.
Ho ho.
Yeah. Yeah. I started taking improv classes. Yeah. I love it. I did it. One, my coach suggested it. So I usually take his advice on a lot of things. I wanted to incorporate a little bit more playfulness into my life this year. I turned 55. I've got this like thrive and alive mantra, thrive and alive at 55. And I spent a lot of time at home. And it's just like, I'm like everybody else, can get in your head. So yeah, I started taking improv class. So I could laugh at myself more.
That's good. If you can't laugh at yourself, what's the point in living?
Great. I laugh at myself all the time now, Craig. You're a father. That gives you lots of times to laugh at yourself, right?
Oh, I have to. I'm doing a lot of laughing at my daughter right now, who's learned to say no and is in a very cheeky mode where she'll come to bring you something and she'll just turn away and walk away, or she'll grab your phone and she'll just take it around the house. and every time she sees you, will just turn a different direction.
Aren't they? They can humble us. And mine's 33 now, Craig, and guess what? It just doesn't end.
That's good. That's good. As long as they can keep me laughing, I'm happy.
Yeah.
What is the one question that you would love to solve?
Last year I visited in St. George, Utah. They have petroglyphs. Do you know what a petroglyph is?
Enlighten me.
Like carvings on a rock of, hundreds and hundreds of, it's native, the native. And so there's all these petroglyphs and it's incredible, right? And they're mostly like figurines and turtles and different, And I sat there and I thought, man, what would I write in stone? Today you can write anything, you can edit it, you can write, but man, you gotta put a lot of effort into writing in stone, right? Like you got to really mean it. And I really sat with that, like, what would I write in stone? I mean, it's taken me a long time. I don't know that I've solidified on what that answer is, but I sit with that a lot. And I have a couple of little petroglyphs at home, and what do you want to write in stone? And I think I don't know if it's solving anything, but I do believe in a coming together. And the last quote in one of my books is "Do not separate." And so there's a word Ubuntu. I am because we are. Mm-hmm. And I think if you talk about, and I was just recently on my birthday party, my dear friend got me a beautiful photo of Ubuntu, and everybody got to sign and write little things on it. And that is kind of what I want to be the essence of me, is that of just really drawing people in together, and the coming together.
Nice. For you, what is an inspiring great leader, and who is a great example of this for you?
Well, real life, in my life right now, my father, for sure. Let me show you. Nobody else can see it, but you can see it. He just sent me this. Conversation rules the world. My father is a Detroit sheet metal worker, GED, simple guy. And he's just taught me so much about hard work and effort and caring for other people, and also having courage. He's foundationalized that in me. And then, a couple others, nationally, I guess, if we think about it. Right now, Father Gregory Boyle, I don't know if you know of him. He runs Homeboy Industries in LA. And it's the largest gang reintroduction coming into, bringing people back along in the world. And the work he does is amazing. And he is so inspiring because he's so caring, but he also has a sense of it's not about him. And he said a quote last year that on an interview that I love so much. He said, "Not everything that works helps, but everything that helps works." And I love that quote because he's so right that today it's so easy to throw out advice and just, this works. And I want me to help. And so he inspires me because he really, truly, passionately believes in helping others. And that I can get behind all the way along. And then Lou Woltz. I love Lou Woltz. He was one of the first books I read, Winning Every Day. And I used to read it in my Alaska store to my team. And I loved him as a coach. And I think he was a great leader.
Thank you for sharing. It's been a great conversation. How can people learn more about what you do, and what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Thanks for asking, and thanks for having me. This has been it's been fun to visit with you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so I have my own website, so you can find me at www.intentact.com, short for Intentions to Actions. We bring it together, intentact.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, and you can always email me at pam@intentact.com. I have 2 books. I actually did 1 chapter. So The Joy of Work, there's a chapter in there. I did a death contemplation meditation to get to it. People are like, what? But if you read it, it'll make sense. And then I have a book, In My Own Words. In My Own Words is really a guide, kind of a mindfulness guide. It's a book of a process. And we have cards that can go with that as well to help people bring mindfulness into their daily life. I think from a corporate standpoint, I do a number of speaking engagements, and we do a lot with MKITs. One of the things we didn't talk about is, and my partner is so good at this, is we make the intangible tangible. Mm-hmm. Mindfulness is intangible. And so people say, why don't people do it? And I'm like, well, we do what's in front of us. So we have an MKIT, which is stop, drop, and roll of mindfulness. We have tangible things that people get, and we teach them how to incorporate it into their daily life. How do we make that very practical and tactical? And then at a deeper level, if you want to go deeper in the pool, then we go to MPeak, and we go into the course that really helps define it more into your leadership in your daily life.
We love what you're doing, Pam, and it's an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I've thoroughly enjoyed learning around how your early upbringings and how that's kind of shaped you, from that ability to be resilient, to have courage, to be brave, to take that leap into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, to understand more about yourself and how you can help other people. And I think that's a really, really important shift from, I love that quote you were talking about at the end there, from the person who's looking after the rehab people around. It's not that everything works helps, but everything that helps works. And I can see that in you, so I can see why that resonates so closely for you. I love the intentional to action, how we can bring the intangible to tangible. I think a lot of people can really take this and use it to more effect in the work that they do. And I love how you, on the spot, were able to draw out an amazing insight for leaders to think about how they approach their leadership in the future. So thank you very much for a wonderful conversation today. It's been a real joy, and I've learnt lots myself, and I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
Thank you, Craig. It was really wonderful to get to spend time with you and your audience, and I appreciate it. It was an honor.
It's time for you to join the Inspiring Great Leaders movement by visiting craigjohns.com.au. Share this podcast on LinkedIn and be sure to hashtag Inspiring Great Leaders. We would love it if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Drop us a line with your feedback and questions, and connect with us on the Craig Johns LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram pages. Be sure to check out the next Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong.